Hi everyone, welcome to Techweek TV, brought to you by Callaghan Innovation. In this session we are going to be exploring how people are changing the lives of people living with disabilities in New Zealand. And joining us for this amazing panel, we have Famir, who's the CTO and co-founder of Kara Technologies, and Marcus Thompson, who does user experience and is the training manager at Aotearoa Technology. Hi guys, how are you?
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks so much for being here today. So I think what we're going to do today, we've got two presentations. So we're going to get Famir to kick off with his, and then we'll ask a few questions, and then we'll go straight on to Marcus. Take us
Thanks,
away.
Sean. As Sean said, I'm Famir, and I'm the CTO of Kara Technologies. At Kara, we are focusing on a global movement for hard of hearing accessibility. And I'll just run through where we came from, a bit about our story, and what we do and what we want to achieve in the future. We started off here about a year and a half ago. This is in our first office at Auckland University. As myself, Arash and Sahar, our CEO and COO, we started off, the idea came about 2 years ago when we started talking to the deaf education centers in New Zealand. And we realized that there is a big gap in the market where there is a lot of deaf students without the resources necessary to go through school life. And we started off Kara Technologies early January 2018 to develop a solution to solve this problem. Now, I want to get into the actual problem a bit more. Now, imagine if you are a deaf child born in New Zealand. You're born to hearing parents, as 90% of children usually are if they are deaf. And your parents might have trouble communicating with you if they don't know sign language, because the main mode of communication is auditory, and you would not be able to communicate with them that well, and you would have a hard time learning from them. After that, when you enter school, if you're in a remote area, you don't have access to the resources and the normal resources and teachers that are usually present in bigger areas, and you would miss out on that important part of your life where you are learning a lot of information. And these are all because there is a lack of resources and a lack of number of teachers available for, who know sign language and who are able to communicate with hard of hearing and deaf children. So just to put it all together, there's a shortage of teachers, and if you're in remote areas, you would not be able to get all that equipment and access to teachers and so on. Of course, teaching is always labor intensive. So if you, for example, it takes, if you're in a remote area, you would have to communicate with a teacher at one session a week through like a Skype or Zoom call. And that is, of course, not enough for a student to go through school life. And of course, the problem becomes even bigger when you think about that sign languages are different for every single country. There's more than 188 sign languages that exist around the world. For example, New Zealand Sign Language is completely different to Australian Sign Language. And it's completely different to American Sign Language, and so on and so forth, even though those countries speak English. And this makes it harder to produce content. For example, New Zealand wouldn't be able to collaborate with Australia to create content for science and maths and so on. And these will all gather and become a lack of inclusivity. And this is the problem that we're trying to solve. The way we try to solve it is using today's best technology available to make sure that we include everyone along the way. We are working on the world's first artificial intelligence-driven hyper-realistic avatar that can translate content into sign language. Meet Nikki. We worked with the deaf education centers over the past year and a half to make sure that every part of her is perfect, from her facial expressions to her full body. And of course, sign language combines both of these aspects along with culture, grammar, and so many other aspects. And of course, these all come together, and we wanted to make sure that we nail down every part. So we worked with deaf education centers, we worked with the deaf community to make sure that we tick all the boxes as we develop our avatar and as we develop everything else. There is, for the facial expressions and the body language, there is a whole area of science dedicated just for the facial expressions and understanding how different muscles portray different emotions through film and through other media. We've worked with a lot of amazing tech people in New Zealand to make sure that the lip synchronization, the facial expressions are all automated. And we've made our in-house artificial intelligence to make sure that we take care of the culture, the grammar, the language structure, because sign language is its own language. And it's not just a translation from, English to sign language. It's an interpretation. It's a different language, and you have to interpret that content in light of the context that you're talking about. And of course, we've been working with a lot of amazing companies around the world to make sure that everything happens smoothly. We are using a state-of-the-art animation engine to make sure that is developed by Epic Games, for example, to make sure that the transition between each sign is done very smoothly. I want to show you Nikki introducing herself in New Zealand Sign Language. And this is a demo that we did quite a while back, actually, but it shows how much a digital avatar can communicate with a person. It's amazing. In today's world, there's so much content out there, and we want to be able to translate and get all that information out there to every single person that exists. For example, on YouTube, there's more than 500 hours of content uploaded every single minute. What do you do with all that information? If you are deaf, you would not be able to access all that. That's what we want to get to. In a few years, we want to make sure that we automatically translate content into sign language from any language into any sign language that exists. And we want to make sure that we do it with everyone's help. This is the end of the presentation, but I just wanted to quickly teach everyone a sign here today. This is the international sign for love. And of course, for any movement, for any thing that we want to be able to do, we would not be able to do it without love. So love everyone and love New Zealand. It's been an amazing journey, and I hope that we all come together and do amazing things. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so I just have a question before we kick into Marcus's presentation. Do you kind of want to be like the avatar meets with Google Translate, so anyone can basically like kind of, for people who aren't deaf and want to be able to communicate, they can either try learn sign, which you've said is quite hard because of all the different languages, or they can actually input into your technology and then they can have a conversation kind of with an intermediary?
It's a really good question. We have a vision for the next 5 to 10 years that we want to get to. And the vision is to make sure that we automatically translate content in a two-way communication as well. Not just, static content that's on YouTube or Netflix or so on, but also communication between myself and someone who's deaf and who knows sign language, and to be able to do that automatically. So definitely I see, not necessarily as, I guess Google Translate sometimes has a bad reputation for not really good translations, but hopefully we'll get better at that,
Awesome. I more meant like it is a tool that people use.
Yes.
And then just the second question I have is, how did you get into this? Do you struggle with this yourself, or like how did you come across this problem?
The idea came about, our CEO, Arash, he had a personal problem in terms of disease, and he noticed, as he was studying at Auckland University, that when he lost hearing in one of his ears, he noticed that there is not a lot of deaf students around Auckland University. And from there, we started investigating. We talked to deaf education centres and we talked to the ministry, and we realised, well, the problem stems from the beginning where there's not a lot of content.
Yeah.
And that's where it all started and snowballed.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, Marcus, we're going to switch over to you. Yeah, go for gold.
Right, okay. Well, morning. Kia ora. My name's Marcus and I am part of Aotearoa Technology, and I'll just put my legs up. It's a little noisy to these original actuators here and our machine that locks us down to the floor. So Aotearoa Technology, we're in the business of movement. We're in the business of creating solutions that help people reshape lives. Particularly, this current product is very much focused in the context of the disability sector somewhat. It started probably about 7 years ago. So my mate of mine, Kevin Housel, we were together and we were out doing field archery, and I was on a hand bike working around the field course, and took a lot of work getting up and down over rough terrain. And Kevin's a very inventive chap, and he's been doing a wonderful product over the years. And so he'd been away and he had to go on an off-road Segway somewhere, and it just got the wheels going. And he came along to me and said, look, if I wasn't walking, this would be awesome on a Segway. So that got us both excited, and I went and we got loaned a Segway. I went and saw a chap down here in Wellington, loaned us a Segway, and took it to my workshop, started putting a seat on it, and then very shortly after that, Kevin said, can I take it home and give this a crack? And so he did, and after the weekend, he'd had the first version. He's a very fast worker. First version sort of knocked up, prototype, and that was the start of the journey. And so the next couple of years were involved in many prototypes and refining the product. And then we eventually ended up with what we see here, with this balance two-wheel machine that is driven through a person's body movement. And in terms of this application of technology, the original Segway technology is fairly old. It's 20 odd years old. It's well proven. It's pretty stable. They've refined it over the years. But the interface of person and machine is where the magic source is. And it's this interface where we're tapping into the mammalian or the subconscious control mechanisms of what it is to balance. So we're accessing movement through balance, and that then enables a person using it to be able to open up and grab hold of other parts of life. So life's not about riding or driving a traditional mobility device, which is quite left brain, right brain sort of action as you do things, but it becomes controlled in your subconscious, and you gesture, you move, you're put in touch with societal norms again in a way that you can now grab and experience the small things in life. And it's the small things in life that become life affirming, and you put all those together, and then that's action in life. So that's we've got a machine that goes from A to B, and it does it well, and it does it with a bit of style, and it can go as fast as 20 kilometres an hour.
Wow.
And so you can kick around town. I can get across the CBD quicker than someone can drive, really. There's a lot of work that we do around placement within society and etiquette and behaviour. So, you know, we're not going down the street scaring old ladies and things, and otherwise we get regulated out of the place very quickly. You know, we have to, it's a wonderful technology, but with this technology you have to behave within the societal whole, so that you become part of society. And if you take a step back from there in this journey, it's such an empowering process and journey, and this embedding of use of technology and embedding it into everyday life so that it becomes seamless, so that the technology isn't the flagship or the big banner that you've got out there in the world. It's the method on how you apply that technology and what you can achieve with it, with the person. So it's that embedding, it's the interface between person and technology. The technology itself addresses an issue, addresses a problem, and in this case mobility, point A to B, and many things go from point A to B. But when you tap into all the soft areas, so to speak, you know, you do that basic function, tap into the soft areas, and then you build an experience. You know, you walk down the street holding your wife's hand, you look them in the eyes because you're not having to worry about tripping over something in front. You're not thinking about the mobility and the motion. And it goes on and on. So essentially the functionality of this is you're balanced over a central fulcrum point, and as you lean forward and as you lean back, you get that drive. Acceleration and braking is all in one, and then as you tilt the seat through the hips, you get your steering. And so you put all those together and you get a very fluid and natural movement. And it starts kicking into the brain in a different way. Yeah, we've had a lot of people who come out of being in a wheelchair for a long time hop in this, and the first comment is, it feels like I'm walking again. And that's a comment that's really telling, because what's happening in the brain is all those control mechanisms that we do in a physiological sense, neurological, for balance and walking, that have been dormant while sitting in a chair pushing along, are all of a sudden active again. So you're not only using whatever in your body that you have available to you for balance, you're also using your mind again. And along those principles of use it or lose it, we're seeing very exciting potential and growth there. And this is just the start, of course. We see this as a game changer in terms of there is nothing like this in the placement of mobility devices as such, significantly around the control. And it's a life-changing experience. You know, it gives people a different attitude, opens different doorways for people to go and explore life. And we get in the habit, when you go through some sort of event, whether you're born with a disability or have a disability through a traumatic event or illness, you become what I would call dislocated from your cultural norm. You don't fit anymore where you used to. You still know it, but you just don't fit. And in that dislocation, there's a whole journey of loss and of grief, and then a journey of habilitation. You've got to come to a point of where you find your new being. Yeah, you can't get back to who you were before because you're busted. You know, you're a different shape. So in that process of habilitation, you find who you now are as a physical being, and our physicality does define us. We define our physicality, how we move in the world, how we walk down the street, with how the elegance, the flow, the integration within the world, and how we move defines who we are. And then conversely, how we think and how we feel defines how we move. So we've got this circular experience going on there based around movement. And so when I say we're in the business of movement, we're tapping into that aspect, that this creation of a fluid movement in people's life, or the ability to access it, then gives people this ability to reshape lives, to go, okay, I'm dislocated, I don't fit here, right, this tool will now allow me, this piece of technology will allow me to access certain environments, you know, whether it's beaches, down, you know, things like beaches and hills, they're sort of the big banner moments, but just moving with ease around town or around the house, or having more energy, not wearing out the shoulders, which aren't, you know, people in wheelchairs, after 20, 30 years, their shoulders are pretty much gone, because shoulders are made for doing a lot of work, but they're not made for walking on. So spreading the health of the body over time, spreading the satisfaction of being able to enjoy the movement, and for it to be more natural. And the more natural it is, the more you can then integrate with society. You've all of a sudden got body language. We used to think, for a while, I used to think that the disconnect to someone in a wheelchair talking to a group of people standing was about height differential. And because you're always looking up, and then you have some people start crouching down, start standing up. But once we're in this, and it's a little different on a carpet surface, it's not quite as snappy, but on a hard surface, whenever you gesture and whenever you move, you start having body rotation, and you start drifting in and out. And you look at a group of people standing, talking, they always move in relation to each other, and that body language and that communication is really important. And all of a sudden, the IQ level of conversations I was having with people standing rose, because I had body language, and I was part of something people could read and something we all knew, and so that interconnectivity of society is, and again, it just goes back to that central interface between, you know, you get the interface between the technology and the person, right? And like what it sounds like where your product's going as well. It then is so empowering to people, and it's liberating, but it gives a platform for people to build a quality in their everyday life and build on those little things. And of course, you know, the reality of this as we grow out into the world, it's desired and wanted by the world. We've on our early prototypes, we had videos that went viral, and we're having people track us down at midnight from Israel and somewhere from Europe, and so, yeah, people all over the world were saying, "Oh, I can see that, and I can see how it's going to fit in my life, and I can see how it's going to change my life, change the shape of my life." So as we say, our mission really is to get this technology out to as many people as we can. You know, there's always affordability issues, and there's logistics around that. But we want to see the nature of this grow and become more and more affordable over time, and more normalised. And normalising something like this also taps into the whole ongoing developmental issue we have in society of e-devices around our shared public spaces, and, you know, the Lime scooters and so on. So it's wonderful. It's getting cars off the road. It's giving people scope and range and interaction with society, but it has to be done in the context and with the acceptance of society as a whole. So, you know, should we regulate these sorts of machines so they can only go 5 kilometres an hour down the footpath? Well, that would be terrible. You can't get across it. You know, I can't regulate you. No, you must not run. Here and here, you will not run. But it's how you use it, that you don't go down the street and scare the old ladies, that you have a social etiquette so that you can interact in those shared public spaces in a way that everybody's happy, and you don't end up with regulation sort of lessening what the product can be and can do.
How much more do you want to do in your present?
Oh, I think that's...
Almost there. Cool.
Awesome.
Great.
Yep.
Oh wow,
So
where do I start? For those of you listening at home, if you have any questions, send them to twtv@techweek.co.nz. We will be answering those as soon as you get them into us. I don't even know where to start. What was quite cool, you guys aren't here, so and I'm sitting next to Marcus, and as he was talking, he was just moving around, and I was like, oh, well, his hand's going that way and he's going that way. And I was like, all of this movement is just coming from you being you, doing your thing. It was a really cool thing to just see when it kind of clicked to me that was what was going on. And I really wanted to understand like the actual, I like knowing how things work. And so it's like, oh, when you go this way, what is the different like kind of, I'm not a scientist, but what is the science in this and the technology where, you can do these things. And then if you don't mind, I want to make a joke. Because who knew Segway technology would have like a way better use case than the current model?
Indeed.
That might be rude, but it's also quite accurate, Okay, I have a few questions. I guess, it is a really powerful moving stories. The technology that you're both working on is pretty incredible, and we do have quite a few examples in New Zealand of people working on, technology to empower New Zealanders, which is really what it's all about. I guess that I never really noticed that a group of people has like a nebulous where they go in and out like that. That's quite an interesting kind of observation from losing that and then gaining it again.
Yes.
And the IQ, you're definitely, I think, right on that would be my assumption for me, and then definitely for you.
Well, you speak to anyone in a wheelchair, and they will have had all had this experience of they're in a wheelchair, they've got someone beside them. Oh, would he like a cup of coffee? Would he like an ice cream?
Like, why don't you just talk to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just it happens all the time. That sort of thing.
And then, on that note, I would like to talk a little bit about bias or unconscious bias, if you don't mind. So I guess, what are some of the things that you both want New Zealanders to know and people to know, maybe to not treat people differently, or actually how to behave? I mean, there's a lot of education gaps, I think. And it's more about noticing the person rather than their difference. Some people don't know how to do that, so how do you do that? Do you want to start?
I reckon it's all about, there's a really good word called inclusivity. Mm-hmm. Instead of talking about the negative side of things, we talk about the positive sides, and we talk about how do we include people, how do we bridge those gaps, like, your device does that, to bridge that gap between the conversations people have and how to bring people in together and include them in everything. So I think it's part of that, and it's less so about labeling specific things, but rather just making sure that everyone's part of the community.
Absolutely. I think, that inclusivity, that the term that I often use is the grace of space, giving people that space to exist and to not prejudge, to let them show you, listen to a person, let them show you where they're at, and build together from there. Yeah.
It's I mean, I have a few friends in wheelchairs, and I'm only now realising how restrictive that movement and unnatural it might be for them when they're in conversations and their body doesn't move with them. I can imagine it can be quite restricting in some ways. Okay, getting to some questions from here. I guess outside of inclusivity, what are the main challenges for people living with disabilities in Aotearoa, and what are they dealing with?
I can start off with, specifically for our case, we work with a lot of hard of hearing and deaf people around New Zealand. I briefly mentioned that in the presentation, but I'll just mention it again. People, so if you're born in a remote area and you're deaf, you would not be able to go to a specialized school. And of course, as you grow up, you learn your language by listening. For example, we listen to our parents talk English or some language, and we learn that. But they would not be able to do that. So they would have to both learn sign language as well as whatever is being taught at school. But the problem at the moment is that because the spread of population and the lack of resources causes the problem that if you're born in a remote area, you would not be able to go to a specialized school, and you have to go to a mainstream school where there is not a lot of teachers or no teacher at all. And sometimes you have to have one session a week, I think, to go through both the materials that is being taught at school, as well as teach you more signs and teach you sign language. That's one of the barriers that starts from the beginning for the hard of hearing and kind of continues throughout. There's a lot of different areas as you grow up. You might not know English that well either, and in the society you would find it really hard to be included.
I think when you work on the premise that you through serious injury and the like, you become dislocated from a cultural norm, you actually then become part of a cultural minority. And in being part of a cultural minority, you're no longer part of the power group. And so there's all these details that happen to you all the time. And other people, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but it's less than empowering. So I think we've still got a ways to go in terms of empowering and listening to the voice of the people who are the specialists in their own disability or in their own issues. That being said, in New Zealand, with ACC, we there's with a system, the bureaucracy is always going to have its weak points, but the principle of ACC is just amazing. And what people are able to do in rebuilding lives, reshaping lives with the support of ACC is significant. But of course, the great pain and often unseen part in New Zealand is our public health system, which does not align with ACC, where the public health system, the people working in it, they do a wonderful job with the resources they have, but they have next to no resources in relation to. So as a society, I would say when the resourcing required to help solve problems and issues and grow aspect in people's lives, when it's tied to public health, it's just not enough. And as a society, I think there's somewhere we need to step up as a society and create some change in that to look after people with essentially the same injuries. And just as a small illustration of this, to the extent that this goes, when I was in Burwood Hospital, broke my back 16 years ago through a skiing accident. Sitting there in Burwood Hospital, I was 32, and there was a guy, he was 62, came in from Invercargill, and he'd got a bug in his spine, and it got his spine exactly the same level as me, so we manifest the same. He was on public health, I was ACC, because it was medical. Right down to the Panadol we got was different. I had Panadol with nice smooth coating, easy to swallow, and early on heaps of pills, and pills are an issue. And he had the chalky, cheap stuff that stuck in your mouth. And if you extrapolate that principle to support back into work, to all the medicines, you can have this medicine, but it's got more side effects. I can have the top shelf medicine that's much nicer in my life. And it goes on and on and on. And the stress to people's life, that is a stressful point in time, any point of change or injury. The stresses, it's through those stresses that people need help. The average lifespan of a marriage post-spinal injury is 5.5 years.
Wow.
They don't last because it's incredibly stressful. Special ones last, and luckily my wife, she stayed. She made it last. So that's, I think, one of the critical areas that can be addressed and needs to be addressed in our society.
You raise a good point about subject matter experts, though, or like anyone who's dealt with the problems before.
Yes.
Because a lot of the solutions that I've seen previously developed across the world are, people from the outside thinking, oh, this is a really cool solution, let's try that.
Yes.
But without the knowledge or without consulting the people who actually need that.
Yeah.
And I think going forward, we need to be able to do that. And we need to make sure that every step of the way, everyone's included in the process of designing, developing, and using technology to benefit the people. If you want to, it's one of the classic cases of starting a business. If you don't talk to your customers, you're not going to have a good business.
Absolutely.
So we got to start there.
So it's like that classic thing of solving a problem, not finding the problem for the solution that you have, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess how accessible is the technology that you're working on, and in general technologies for people living with what they're living with? Is it too expensive? Do you think the price will come down, and how do we make it more accessible to everyone?
For our case, there's a wide variety of different kind of half solutions that exist, and for example, there is relay interpreting services. So if you are in an interview, for example, job interview, for example, and you're deaf, you would get the relay interpreting service, which has been, the technology has been around for quite a long time actually, but of course has its own limitations. There needs to be someone at the end of the line, so on and so forth, and it's been very useful so far and relatively inexpensive. On the flip side of it, there's now apps that do closed captioning, but of course, not everyone can read English, and when it comes to children especially, they would not be able to read at all. So there's always gaps there. But in terms of the solutions that are available at the moment, inexpensive, yes, mostly, but not complete solutions, if I will, yeah.
Yes.
That's my 2 cents on that, yeah.
Absolutely. Comes down to scale, and because you've got the cultural minority, the solutions carry a cost, they carry a premium cost because the scale's not big enough. With our own product, we are tackling the world. We're straight away looking to sell through Australia, through the States and into Europe. So we're trying to get that scale, leverage off the scale of a global market to bring the price down for people at home. Our dream is that it becomes at an affordable point where it's able to be purchased by people individually, purchased through third-party funders, and also to a level where the likes of the Lions and the Rotary Club and so on could all chip together and sort things out for people. But that also, there is always going to be a cost with these low volume things, and the cost, I believe, then is a responsibility back into society, and society in a whole needs to help bear that cost, because these issues are there for those that have unfortunate events or circumstances, and we all have a responsibility for each other. And just like to close a point from the previous little question that I is that parents with children that are born with a disability, that's a different but the same road, and one that is terribly under-resourced in our country, and incredibly hard work on the parents. The parents who go through that journey, that the sheer labour and love that they have to put in and do put in every day with minimal resources is another area that desperately needs help from society.
Is that where
as a whole,
organisations like Yes kind of come in?
Yep, and CCS and Halberg and people like that. But it's still
not enough.
If you compare a person with spina bifida, say, and from the outside, there's a lot of similarities to a spinal injury. An impact injury. But the resourcing that goes into building a life just is not there, and it's got to change at some point. We're not doing well there as a nation.
That's also from the mental health element of what you have to go through and deal with and recreating your life, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a few things that came to my mind as you were talking about that. Was there's going to be societies. I guess there's a need for the society to focus on this, the government to focus on this, on the problems that exist. But I think in the long term, if you do the math it would actually be better for the government, better for the society, because you would have more people included in the society, more people in the job market, more jobs created because of all that.
Yes.
So I think it's really important for everyone out there to consider this information and make sure that it's not just about the short-term goals, but the long-term.
Absolutely.
And, we got to get there.
It's almost a purpose problem as well, right? Where you're like, well, you want everyone to have purpose and meaning in life, and you can't just have that for one subset of the population. You need everyone to have access and be inclusive of that. You've actually got a question for me come in from online, which is kind of related to this point, which is, how would you love to see companies implementing your avatar experience within their business? And I guess that's on the employee side, but also in the interaction with customers as well.
It's fascinating because the technology allows us, the technology that we're developing at the moment allows so much to be done. It could be as simple as a small interpreting avatar at the bottom, Nikki at the bottom of your video content, anything from books to videos and audio, down to, here's a cool statistic. On YouTube, the top 20 videos that are watched that are not music videos are children shows, kids shows.
Okay.
The top 20 most viewed videos all time. Now, if we can have Nikki either down the bottom there somewhere that can, interpret that for the children, or if we can have the avatars themselves, the kids shows, doing the whole thing in sign language, that would be the ultimate goal. Imagine instead of talking, they would do it in sign language, a different version of that. And I think those are really cool and really amazing solutions that we could get to in the future, soon, hopefully.
That's quite cool.
So Nikki could do Game of Thrones.
I don't know about Game of Thrones for children.
Oh, for adults.
Adults
Sensing
for sure.
a theme here. No spoilers. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. I actually have two more. Let's see. How do you think what are the most exciting New Zealand technologies providing empowerment in this space? Can we look at some other examples outside of your own organisations that you might be familiar with and the impact that they're having on New Zealanders' lives?
I wrote down a note. So if I can, yes, there was recently technology is at its best when it's a simple solution. You solve a really amazing problem with a simple solution that just works. And I think I'm not too familiar with them, but I have heard that they recently released an app, TalkTown, TalkTownGame.net, I think. They help deaf children be part of society and go through different parts in their life with ease. For example, they want to go shopping, they would be able to do that by themselves, so on and so forth. So that's something that I've seen come out very recently, and it's really cool to see everyone passionate about whatever they're passionate about and actually doing something about it. That's just an example that I thought would be useful.
Marcus?
There's Adaptify down in Christchurch are doing some very interesting things, and not everything's glamorous. So one of their products that they've got rolling at the moment is about bladder management.
Yep.
And it's an unseen technology, but if a person's in a situation where they're not in control of bladder management, they're instantly isolated from wider society.
Yep.
You're not going to go down the street, you're not going to go and sit in a coffee shop or go to the movies, or it's endless. You're just isolated.
Yep.
And so things like that can just turn a person's life around and normalise, and the mental health that would go in behind that is just immense.
And that tool, it's Mike, right?
Yeah, Mike.
And so that was a tool developed so that you could know when to go to the bathroom, because you don't know that, right, sometimes.
Yes.
And so it measures that whole thing for those of you watching at home.
So
which,
context was spinal injury and high
so it's not glamorous, but it's also super useful, and a lot of people don't even know that that's an issue, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, we don't know to ask questions. We don't even know that we're allowed to ask questions sometimes. So the last question that I have for you, and it's a bit of a personal one, I hope you don't mind, is actually just your friend who turned around and was like, I've got an idea. What do you think he wanted for you? And how did you even get into this kind of conversation around this? Because it's quite a cool story.
Kevin's a sort of a guy that just wants the best for people. He's got a big heart and a very clever man, and so he just wanted to see me be able to do the best I can in my life, and we shared that journey together in that development. And of course, once we started and got to a point where we proved the concept and proved it, what it was starting to do, and then saw the excitement out in the world, and then started having other people on it. And initially we thought it was only going to be people sort of very similar to myself, but it's doing all these other things that we didn't plan for, because of the nature of it. And then at that point we were fueled by what we call the Omeo smile. You get someone on here for a while, and then just this big grin starts coming, and then we're going to give them the Omeo massage later on to sort of get their cheeks back down to normal. But it's just that human contact and improving people's life is the motivation for all the hard work that it's taken Kevin to get to this point.
I think it's true. Like, you're very contagious. Like, I've got this grin on. Just from seeing you kind of enjoy yourself so much. Okay, so that's all we have time for. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. You guys at home, go check out the wonderful technologies that these guys have. Help them out, spread the word, and thank you so much for joining this session, and have a great day.